Hey everyone, I'm Sean O'Loughlin. Welcome back to another Seafood Innovations episode of the Aquademia podcast. In these episodes, we sit down with people who are taking a chance on something new and innovative in the seafood world. This week, we're sharing our interview with Markos Scheer from Seagrove Kelp Company. We sat down with Markos at SENA 2019 to talk about kelp farming and why it could potentially be the next big superfood, finally knocking kale down a few pegs. I hope you enjoy our conversation, and remember, if you like this show and want to support us, take a minute to subscribe, rate, and review Aquademia wherever you listen. If you want to be more involved in the community, go to www.aquaculturealliance.org/membership to become a member and gain access to our MyGAA social platform, exclusive audio and video content, and a whole bunch of other goodies. All right, kelp is the word of the day. Let's talk about seafood.
Welcome to the Aquademia podcast.
Our diet is hurting the environment in myriad ways. I mean, we desperately need to eat more seafood.
This is a pioneering industry with a whole lot of people who have really good ideas and a lot of experience and are unafraid.
Aquademia is your go-to podcast for a fresh take on all things seafood.
So we're sitting down with Markos Scheer of Seagrove Kelp Company out of Alaska. How's it going, Markos?
It's going great. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah,
thanks for being here.
Thanks for joining us. It's awesome that we're getting to meet so many people at this seafood show that have just innovative ideas and some new technologies, so it's fantastic. So that's why Markos is here with us right now. Can you just give us a quick background, your personal history? Where'd you get started? How'd you end up where you are?
Sure. So I actually come from the seafood side. I moved to Southeast Alaska in 1982. My mother is a botanist, and she was doing some reforestation work on Prince of Wales Island, which is Prince of Wales Island is an island in Southeast Alaska. It's a little larger than the state of Delaware. It is got about 1,000 miles of coastline. It's primarily a forested island. And so I was in 8th grade there, and I lived there until when I was 16. I left home, got emancipated, and I had to get a job. And so I went to work for a seafood processing company in Ketchikan in 1980.
Now, where is that?
Ketchikan
It's Alaska.
It's about 50 miles west of Prince of Wales.
Okay.
So it's the largest city near Prince of Wales. Prince of Wales is pretty small.
I just know I went there once. It was gorgeous.
It was,
and I didn't go that long ago, back in 2010. I don't want to get too off topic, but I remember staring out into the waters and watching the fish just jumping out of the water, and I was like, "This still happens. This is amazing."
It does still happen. The fish and the whales and the eagles. If you have seen the eagles, and I mean they're like crows. There are so many bald eagles that are in the area. You can go out in the morning when the salmon are running, and you can see 50 bald eagles just swirling around in the.
It's amazing.
In the
Alaska's definitely close to the top of my bucket list for travel. So
you should go.
I'd love to get up there someday.
We should travel up there and we'll do another interview.
There we go.
You should come and see the farm.
We'll come see the farm. I'd love to.
Yeah. Well, no, that'd be great. You're welcome to. So I started there, and I spent. So I finished high school, and then I worked there through till I finished college, and then I came back after college, and I spent another 6 years working for them. So that lasted through 97. Then I went to law school. And I practiced law for the better part of 20 years in the seafood and maritime industry.
Okay.
And I became involved in this group called the Alaska Fishery Development Foundation in 2007. And through AFDF, we started focusing on, in 2013, on mariculture as the next area of development, because all of the really the fisheries, the wild harvest fisheries in Alaska were mature. The focus is on full utilization. There isn't a big biomass out there, and so we started looking at this really conceptually about how do we help this industry grow, and how do we move this ball forward, and with all of the existing infrastructure and things. And as I started going through that, process. I started thinking that maybe this is something that I ought to look into. It's really a fledgling industry in Alaska. There's a few oyster farmers. There's a few kelp farmers.
Yeah, I thought there was some kind of some laws or legislation against sea farming in Alaska that
There is it is against the law to farm finfish.
To farm finfish,
but
okay.
you can
and that's a state law.
That's a state law. And that's unlikely to change. The seafood industry is the largest employer in the state.
Yeah.
It's unlikely to change. However, it is permissive to grow any indigenous species that you can find in Alaska. And among them are multiple brown kelp species. There's oysters are the one exception to that because number one, that the water's too cold, they don't reproduce, and number two, they grandfathered in when it became a state. So there had been some oyster farming prior to that, which is why Pacific oyster farming is permissible in Alaska. So that was the genesis of the whole idea. And I spent the last 4 or 5 years putting together a business plan and trying to find capital. And because this is what we're doing is larger than what we've seen in Alaska, but small by scale anywhere else in the world, right? Yeah. So it took me about 4 or 5 years to put the whole package together and to get the site lease through the process took me a couple of years, but we made it through that process last fall, and so we're going to start operating in 2019.
Oh, so this is
brand new?
Yeah, brand new.
Brand new.
So talk to us about Seagrove and kelp. What's the process? How does it work? What are the goals?
So Seagrove Kelp farms, we have a 127-acre farm that's about 6 miles south of Craig, Alaska on Prince of Wales Island. It's a shellfish and kelp farm. That's the plan.
Okay.
We're going to introduce
oysters.
Yep. Yeah. We can also do mussels. There's a blue lip mussel that is indigenous that some people are trying to propagate, but it's smaller. You can also do giant red sea cucumbers and there's a number of rock scallops and other things that would try to get into later. But first, we're going to do kelp, primarily because it's a faster grow out period. Water's a little colder in Alaska, so shellfish take 2 to 3 years to reach market size. So we're gonna focus on kelp. The plan is to plant out 100 acres of kelp in the fall. We're in the process of building a kelp nursery in Ketchikan in conjunction with Oceans Alaska Marine Science Center. So we'll have that operational hopefully by June. Yep. We'll spend the summer trying to perfect our processes, and we can start seeding out in October of this year.
Pretty cool. So what are some of the goals in regards to what the kelp is going to be used for and where you're selling to? And I think just a lot of our listeners are some of our listeners are new to aquaculture. They don't know a lot about it, and they might not understand what are the benefits to farming kelp.
Well, that is a great question, and it's a great concept to discuss. Kelp is such a remarkable plant. It is it is so rich in nutrients and protein and minerals and fiber, all of those things. What really makes it appealing to me is that it's renewable, it's sustainable. I'm growing species. I have to source my seed for the farm kelp within 50 kilometers by water of the farm site. So the species I'm going to grow are Saccharina latissima, which is sugar kelp, Nereocystis, which is luteana, which is bull kelp, and ribbon kelp, which is Alaria marginata. And those grow in the area, so we could source our seed from local stocks to maintain that genetic diversity. It is locally it's a counteragent to ocean acidification because it takes carbon dioxide out of the water.
Fantastic.
It produces nitrogen.
That's great.
It has, there's so many additive qualities. It is, the carbon footprint is positive actually because of what it does in the water,
because it reverses it.
And and because of the systems that we're trying to use here, I believe that when we do this, that it will be beneficial to the environment. It'll be beneficial economically, and when we introduce shellfish into it, there's a symbiotic relationship between growing kelp and growing shellfish on the same site.
Now, how long does it take for kelp to mature so that you can harvest? Yeah.
All of these species are annual species. This is not like Luminaria, which is a heavily harvested. It's a species harvested in a lot of other places like Iceland and that. Which those plants, they can take the top off and it will continue to grow. It could be 100 years old.
Yep.
These are annual plants, so we'll seed out and plant and harvest every year. So it will seed out in October and November.
Okay.
And we'll harvest between the 15th of April and the 15th of May every year. So all of it will be out of the water by May 15th.
So you're going right through the coldest part of the year.
That's when it grows.
Okay.
That's when it germinates, and grows into the mature plants. And then over the course of the summer is when it goes into its reproductive cycle, starts producing sori, which would then repopulate the populations the next fall.
Interesting.
What are some examples of products that will be using your kelp? If you were to guess?
Ideally, I want to see Alaska kelp paired with Alaska seafood, because I think between
human consumption,
between the nutritional components of it is additive to the Alaska seafood that's already produced. I think that's the optimal market that I want to try to work in.
Is there a market for there already for kelp?
There is
human consumption up in Alaska?
There is some, and there are a number of smaller companies that are producing some really terrific products. There's a company called Barnacle Foods out of Juneau that's producing this fabulous salsas and pickles and kelp pow and a number of different kind of seasoning grades.
Yeah, that's neat.
So I
imagine that's a pretty niche market.
It is, but I think it's growing, and I'd like to do some direct to retail products, but also I think partnering with wild, sustainable Alaska seafood is consistent with my message and what I'm trying to do and what they're trying to do. So, but that because there isn't really any material production out of Alaska, that's those products and that marketplace is still developing.
It's wild. Do you know of any other kelp farms that are in development in your area that you know of, or are you kind of it?
No, I think we'll be the most significant because we're vertically integrated. But there are a number of farms up out of Kodiak that are working. They're on the third year of production.
Okay.
There's a farm near Ketchikan that's in its third year of production. So there is a burgeoning industry, but it's not. There's more development to happen.
It's neat though to think of, as you're talking about from a consumer perspective, and for some of our listeners who maybe don't know what kelp looks like or tastes like, and when you mentioned people are putting it in salsa and things of that nature, I think that really expands. And for some people who might be hesitant to try it, if they start with something they're comfortable with, like a salsa, and say, hey, guess what was just in that, and it kind of expand their taste buds.
Well, really, people have been eating kelp and kelp derivatives for their whole life. Carrageenan is produced from kelp.
Okay, yep.
There are alginates that are produced from kelp, and you'll have them in ranch dressing and ice cream and a whole host of other products.
You had me at ranch dressing.
You can't go wrong with ranch dressing. But just the species that we're looking at growing, things like if you look at bull kelp, that bull kelp is which is the Nereocystis, is what they're using for the salsas, and it's got a real meaty stipe that makes great for making pickles and for grinding for added and value-added products that they're producing. Sugar kelp would be, if you've had a seaweed salad at a restaurant, that would be a good corollary to what that kelp could be used for.
Okay.
Ribbon kelp would be, you'd see that in a miso soup or something like that.
Okay.
They're all good as dried products. All seaweeds actually are edible. So there's there are 650 different kinds of seaweed that grow on the west coast of North America.
I would not have guessed that.
Yeah, I'm curious why in America it's not. I feel like it's not something that people think of. Why is it? Why do you think it's like Americans are not? I don't know how to say it. Like, I feel like if I was to say, oh, with our dinner tonight, we're gonna have this, we're gonna have this species of seaweed, and they'd be like, really? Like,
kelp is. In my opinion, kelp is the new kale. It's a superfood that can be used anywhere you can use a green vegetable.
And it may come to be that very quickly.
Right.
I mean, kale, when I was younger, kale was just a garnish.
Right.
And I ate it when I was a kid because I would eat everything on my plate, and everyone would be like, my family would be like, you don't eat that. That's just for decoration.
I love to eat the garnish.
And so, and then now, just in the last 5-10 years, it became this huge. Everyone is making kale smoothies and eating kale all the time. So that may be replaced by kelp and like that very fast.
I think it is. I think because of the ecosystem services that kelp provides and the known health benefits, and it's becoming much more popular as a foodstuff. I think what did the U.S. imported maybe $250 million worth of kelp over the last year. It's becoming much more familiar to the consumers.
Yep.
I think its day is here, and I think that's where it will continue to grow over time. There's some great work being done out of Maine in introducing a whole host of seaweed-based products out of Maine, seaweed salads and fresh greens, and most of that's being distributed on the eastern seaboard.
Okay.
I'd like to see that on the western seaboard. I think the market, I think the health conscious population thinks that when they hear kelp, they think healthy, and I just think they haven't.
It's a good slogan.
They haven't had it readily available for them to kind of make it part of their daily routine. But they eat kelp, and when they do, they'll like it.
So I know we've talked about this a little bit. If we switch gears, thinking down the road, future, is there any current challenges that you're facing, or any that you foresee happening down the road that's worth addressing? Or
I think number one in that is market development, finding the right place to get the kelp in front of the consumers. Because there's value there. It's a great product. It's good for you. It's sustainable. Everything about it is positive, and getting that message to consumers, and so that they could make that, and then have the product available. So when they're at the store, they can make that choice. Right now, they can't make the choice because it's not there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that's number one.
Okay. And you said your hope is to start introducing some, was it oysters?
Oysters. We'll start with Pacific oysters.
Now, you said you're going to start off focusing on the kelp, but you're also going to be growing the oysters. Are you going to seed those oysters from the get-go as well?
No, we'll start with...
Because you said they take longer to grow up there.
We'll get a first harvest of kelp in hopefully next spring. We'll get this first harvest out. There's a lot to learn. Let's try to do one thing relatively well before we try to do two things poorly. So that's part of it. But I also think that it's part of introduce those perhaps in the spring of 2021 is when that seed would be. You make your commitments for seed in the fall, and then they'd start producing that seed over the new year. So hopefully we'll be in a position to start that in the fall of next year to outplant into the Flupsies starting in 2021.
Excellent.
Cool. Sounds like you got it all figured out.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I made a rather abrupt turn in my career to jump on this train. So I hope it goes well.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to get out there to our listeners? Anything else that you'd like to mention?
What do you think the takeaway is that you would want our listeners to remember from this?
Eat kelp. Take a chance. Go do something that matters. I think that what I'm doing here, I'm hoping that it will be the beginning of a material industry in Alaska and for coastal Alaska of a non-extraction based seed-grown products that, there's a host of life in Alaskan waters that which is suitable for this kind of activity. And if we do it, and we do it well, and we do it responsibly, I think it can change the trajectory of these coastal communities.
Yeah, for sure.
If we have listeners that want to contact you or want to learn more, do you have a website or somewhere that we can direct some of our listeners?
There is a seagrovekelp.com is our website. Okay. We also have a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Oh, excellent.
We'll be
and is that also Seagrove Kelp?
So Seagrove Kelp as well. Okay. And we're going to be updating our progress as we go through this, so people can share the joys,
the venture with you,
and hopefully not the misery with me. But
we'll make sure to link to your website and some of your social media in the show notes of this show. And
wonderful.
And anything else you guys want to say?
Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I just thank you very much for the opportunity to come and talk to you. I'm obviously excited about this, and
yes, this is great.
It's really cool.
A little petrified at times.
I would love to try a bull kelp pickle.
They had
that sounds phenomenal.
It is tremendous. Have you ever had watermelon pickles?
No, I've never had pickled fruit. I've heard it's a thing.
It's really good because it's a nice firm. They had products that won a new products competition last year, and they were here at the show. Okay. And in fact, we went and made kelp pickle martinis at one of the local restaurants. It was actually really good. Dirty martinis with kelp pickles. Yeah, it was.
I tried that too.
You tried that too?
Did you?
Yeah.
No, I didn't, but I will gladly.
Yeah, you'll be on that.
We're gonna get you on the show again. We'll have some of those.
Yeah. We'll open a jar of pickles. We'll have some martinis. It'll be great.
But you can. I'm not affiliated with the company at all. But Barnacle Foods has. You can order kelp pickles, and they have a curry and a dill and that are made from bull kelp. And there are a number of salsas and all of that. I mean, you can get those, and they'll ship them right to your house.
Let's do it. We'll do it. It's going to happen.
You should do it. You should try it.
Well, maybe we'll live stream it when we try it and do a live food review on it.
That would be. I'm sure they would appreciate that very much. But they're great. There's some young folks out of Juneau, and they're doing great work, and they're really. It's fun to watch them, and I think they're part of this whole process. We've got to produce raw material that people that are can make into cool new things.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a trend too, not only in the seafood business, how it's evolved over the last 20 years, but I feel people in general are more experimental, and if you hear something that's sustainable or healthy, you're kind of drawn to that a little bit more than we were in the past.
More brave and more interested in trying new things.
And I think you said the way that you were talking about your product when it's ready, I think is going to draw some big interest. And just from hearing what you had to say, I'm really excited to now try it myself.
Yeah, I really want to try it too. It's exciting.
This
is the problem with doing this stuff at a seafood show, because we just talk about food the whole time. And I'm always like, I want to try that, I want to try that, I want to try that. 10 years from now, I'm going to be 1,000 pounds.
No, but if you eat kelp, you won't be 1,000 pounds because you'll be a lean, mean fighting machine.
That's right.
It's a superfood.
Yeah.
Superfood.
It is. And it is so versatile. There's so many things that you can make with kelp, and you can have kelp straight, and you can have dried kelp and powdered kelp and fresh kelp, blanched kelp. I mean, there's 100 uses that every one of us could integrate into our diet every day.
It's a superfood with virtually no footprint.
That's exactly right.
That's
positive carbon footprint.
So how do you go wrong with that? You don't.
Awesome.
Interesting factoid. Bull kelp is one of the fastest growing plants in the world. In certain conditions, it can grow up to a foot a day.
Wow.
Wow, that's remarkable.
That is remarkable.
That's awesome. Well, I'm really excited to see where this goes and to watch it blow up, and to be one of the first podcasts to talk about it and promote kelp for human consumption.
Yes.
So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Markos Scheer with Seagrove Kelp Company up in Alaska. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon. I'm sure we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, please do. And I look forward to it. Thank you for the opportunity to tell my story.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
That was our conversation with Markos Scheer from SENA 2019. I hope you enjoyed it, and I just want to say I'm excited to see if this is accepted by consumers in the near future, and if it is, how it will influence our diets and health. Check out the show notes for links to Seagrove's website and social media accounts. Remember, if you want to participate in this show, please leave us a rating and review, or email us questions and comments at podcast@aquaculturealliance.org, or call and leave us a message at 1-603-384-3560. Lastly, make sure you go to www.aquaculturealliance.org/membership to become a member. Thanks so much, everyone.